Hi, and welcome to the Uke Builders Workshop, co-sponsored with the Ukulele Guild of Hawaii. Today we have a couple special guests, Aaron Oya, Uke maker extraordinaire, and also the Inlay.
Getting into inlays. Inlays is becoming a major part of what I do now. So.
Wonderful. All right. And our musical guest, you just heard a little bit from Kalei Gamiao.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
All right. We'll be hearing more full songs from you later, and also closing out the program for us.
All right.
All right. Why don't you come down and join the conversation?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right. So to begin the program, we're going to be having a conversation with Aaron, and I don't know. I guess we've all met through the Ukulele Guild and Ukulele Guild activities.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started with, your interest in ukuleles and where that developed?
Well, it's funny how that goes. My mother actually bought me a building class one year for my birthday, and she said she was actually going to take the class, build one for me. She said, forget that. I'll buy it for you. You build your own. And, I took the class. A gentleman by the name of Mike Ueno out in Wanaloa Valley. And it was a good class. Got interested. Bought another kit from Mike Chalk, whom we all know, and went from there. Built my second one, built my third one, and I'm not a woodworker by trade, but I just started building and getting heavily into the craft itself. So It's been about 10 years, right about now. And funny, right at about that time is, I believe, when the guild first started ramping up as well too. Actually, about 8 years ago, give or take. So immediately joined the guild, and opportunity for me to meet fellow builders. And the learning curve on something like this can be really steep. But I learned quickly the guild just brings, builders together, and it's a very good community locally where we share, we share. So I've taken advantage of that as a young builder. And then fortunately now, as we go through the exhibitions, I've sort of turned the corner. So Mike asked me for the last few years to actually teach some classes, and you and I got into conversation at this past exhibition. So that was kind of interesting. So,
cool.
You start from a little baby, you start crawling, and then next thing you know, you're running and people are coming to you.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about the Guild, too, is it's an opportunity for people to share, because everybody's growing at different rates and they're learning different tricks and techniques. So, just through these events, it's an opportunity just for people to talk back and forth and share ideas and, share building techniques or little things that they work for them.
Oh, absolutely. What's interesting about the Guild, and I talked to Brian Tolentino a couple of years ago, and, you think the Ukulele Guild is primarily builders. But Brian, as a player, comes in and he says, well, I bring a different dimension, because then he, as a player, just like Kalei, can come and, help us as builders, design our instruments or focus our instruments to that of where it really is going to end up with the players. It's important for us as builders to get feedback from the players. Otherwise, we're just kind of shooting blindly unless we're players ourselves, right? So,
where are you at? How many ukuleles have you made in your career?
Ukuleles are... probably about, not many, probably about 50 or 60 or so. I don't do a whole lot. I guess like most builders, it's primarily a hobby.
Yeah.
And
we still got to work for a living.
We still got to work for a living. Fortunately, I guess my wife sort of enjoys it. I don't golf. I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but you get to sell your instruments, and for profit, hopefully. But
not much though.
It allows me to buy toys. For guys, our toys are tools and things like that. So I got a full shop because of my ukulele building. So at least I got something to pass on to my kids, whom, hopefully they get into building one day too.
You were telling me that your son made this
Actually,
one?
well, he's 11 years old now. So he started this in 2006. And of course I helped him, but yeah, this is his instrument.
To see that a 10 or 11-year-old can make an instrument of this quality just blows me away.
Well, in his situation, what's unusual is he actually plays, at that young age, and Kalei, you can probably comment on this, and these young players nowadays, they got some talent, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So for an 11-year-old kid to play, something like this, I think it's a really good instrument for him. From a playability standpoint, you can get a cheap instrument out there, and then you can struggle with it. A friend of mine told me a long time ago, who's a musician, and you can comment on this, Kalei. He said any good musician can play any instrument. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely
so,
true.
as a builder, I took that and I said, well, that's true, but any good musician, to me, shouldn't have to. Like, you're a good musician, And that's not just any instrument you're holding right there.
Yeah.
That is a really good instrument,
Yeah.
right? So you can take that and just go on with it, right?
Yeah.
So for an 11-year-old, my 11-year-old son to play something like this, I think it helps him play as well too, you know. So kind of good that he has his own pride that he built it, he signed the inside. So that's kind of neat. And yeah, it's a good father-son project, right?
Let's have Kalei just play this a little bit and give us some comments about the oud.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No problem. The sound is really sweet. The neck is really comfortable, and I like how it's so easy for my fingers to move up and down the fretboard. I think that's what a lot of players are looking for nowadays in ukuleles is playability. And this is such a beautiful instrument, and I can't believe that your son built it. That's amazing. I never would think, an 11-year-old kid could do something like this. And
I guess his dad tutored him a little bit.
oh yeah, you must be really proud.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned two things that as a builder I think is important for builders to realize. And unless the builders focus on this, you as a player will not play this person's instrument. And I think two things that's important for you as a player is, and you mentioned it, sound. And the second thing that I think some builders overlook is playability. Right, playability. What do you describe as playability? You said that's a playable instrument, right?
Yeah, it's just really comfortable. You know, for musicians, our hands are the ones that do all the work, and for it to be comfortable, that's what lets you, play as to your extent of your skill. And sometimes you're being, if you don't get an ukulele that's comfortable, you're kind of held back. And with this ukulele, it's there. The playability is there. The comfortableness is there. And
Aaron, is there something specific about this ukulele that you can identify that makes it more playable?
You know, Kalei had mentioned two things that I feel builders should really focus on, and that is sound and playability. You know, so as far as this instrument, if you really take an instrument like this, for a player, what they do is they touch the neck. So to me, the neck is a big part of the focus on where builders should really focus on. Now, Kalei, if you don't mind, you said this is a playable instrument, right?
yeah,
But you don't necessarily know what makes it playable. Well, in the guitar community, they have different profiles of neck. So if you look at that neck, for those that play properly, that has what is known as a flattened D neck. So the back part of the neck actually has a little flat. So if you run your thumb behind the neck, you'll feel that and if you run your thumb there, you'll feel that it's kind of flat going all the way up and down.
yeah,
So, elements such as that make for certain players, good playability for there. The other thing that's added to that instrument is the fretboard is a little bit wider. So a lot of players nowadays, they're pulling strings, right?
yeah.
So are you a string puller?
Sort of,
Or pusher or something, right?
Yeah.
So what that does is it gives the players room to play. The string spacing is the same. It's a standard string spacing, but it gives players a lot of room to go ahead and pull off strings and things of that nature. You had mentioned earlier that you ran your fingers up and down the neck as well too, right?
Yeah, it's just really smooth, and it just cups this part of your between your thumb and your pointer. It just goes right in between, and it just feels comfortable. You don't really get that from too much ukuleles.
See, this is the benefit of the guild. You put a player with a builder, and then we can go bang stuff off of each other, and I get it from the player exactly what he needs. Now, from a player standpoint, you may not necessarily know the technical part of what makes that feel. So as a builder, if we don't already know, we gotta guess, or we gotta try this and that. So what I've done is, if you look at this instrument in particular, it actually has a binding around the fretboard. All the binding is on this one is a piece of coil around a cocoa fretboard. You can't see the fret ends on either side. What's also done on this instrument is, normally it's squared off at the end. And I learned this from Derek Schmieser at G-String. He throws a bevel in his instrument. So I've done that as well too. So there's a bevel actually going into the binding around the outside. Add that with what we call fret dressing. So the ends of the frets are actually filed down at 5 different angles and then sanded smooth. So it's sort of rounded on the end. So when you talk about your fingers move up and down, we were talking about that earlier, fingers move up and down the fretboard, nothing gets caught on the edges of the frets, and it makes it comfortable for the player. Actually, I learned that from Dr. Byron Yasui. We were in a workshop with the guild, of all things, and this is where builders like us benefit. He goes and plays an instrument, and he said the thing that that bothers him about some instruments is he'll go ahead and he'll strum the instrument, and he'll strum right here on the neck. If the frets are sticking out, he'll start bleeding. And that's really, really bad. You shouldn't be able to draw blood from an instrument. So hopefully you don't draw blood from this one, right? Yeah, so basically a neck profile, and there are different types of neck profiles. Now what I find is guitar players turn ukulele players, they like rounded and fatter neck profiles, you know. Ukulele players such as my son, who's 10 years old, he'll like a thinner neck profile, which makes it easier for his small hands, right? Now when you start getting into thinner neck profiles, you start dealing into areas such as, well, how stable is the neck and things like that. And so I do some things to this instrument, like right up the fretboard, there's a carbon fiber, what is known as a truss rod. So the carbon fiber rod actually stiffens up the neck all the way down here. And that adds to some sustain coming out of the sound over here. So generally I can get away with doing some thinner necks because there's reinforcement going up and down the neck. But yeah, neck profile is absolutely important. You know, I think some of the instruments I've seen out there, the builders have kind of looked over and just took it for granted that the neck doesn't make a difference. But the profile itself is absolutely important. And some players may or may not know that. You'll know what makes a playable instrument, right? Yeah. But as far as the little details, that's important for the builder to know too. Now, if a player knows that, you can be specific if you ever order a custom instrument as far as what type of profile that you want thrown into your neck to match your style of play, because every player is different. They're going to want a different neck profile. If they don't know what they want, this can really, I don't know, you comment, it can help you or hurt you, right?
Yeah,
right.
It can.
Do you put carbon fiber truss rod in all your instruments?
I do, actually, I do. Actually, I've built 2 tipples, which is a 10-string on 4 courses, 10-string steel string. So the amount of tension going on the bridge, the first prototype I did, I actually put 2 of them on just because I didn't know how it was going to react. But yeah, I put carbon fiber truss rods. Not necessarily because the neck is going to go anywhere. You know, the nylon instrument, the ukulele is a nylon strung instrument, doesn't put a whole lot of tension on here like a steel string guitar. But what I find the carbon fiber rod up here does is it stiffens up the neck and it reduces the amount of vibrational loss up on the headstock. So it drives your vibrational energy down to the bridge. And most people will tell you, you know, if you make the headstock heavier, you'll end up with sustain. So it's the same principle, stiffening up the neck so there's no vibrational loss up here. Something unique about this, and I don't know how you take to this, this is not entirely the most ideal bridge, so to speak, as far as a player that wants to change strings. I don't know if you noticed this, Kalei, but this bridge is actually a Thai-style bridge. It has 8 holes, though, even though it's only 4 strings. So if you, well, we'll turn it around this way. But if you guys come on this side and you look on, if you come around this way, Kalei, if you look at the string, you'll see 8 holes, 2 holes for each string. And I learned that from actually classical guitar builders. What that does is that allows me to keep the break angle over the saddle. And for those of you that know Thai-style bridges, normally you tie it around the string and it'll reduce the break angle on the saddle. So by doing this type of tie, which is a pain in some cases, it allows me to keep break angle coming across the bridge. So little things like this I've incorporated in my build. I don't do this for everyone because not everyone has the patience to tie a bridge like this. My son is fortunate that I tie his strings for him. So,
I noticed you have a little bit of different shape in your saddle.
In the saddle.
Also.
Well, this is a compensated saddle. You know, with any type of fixed string length or fixed length instrument, you know, with a mechanical, what we call mechanical scale frets, there's a thing called intonation and compensation. As the string diameter gets bigger, you know, the more you press it, the likelihood of it to go sharp as you come up the fretboard. So what you have to do is you have to theoretically lengthen the strings. And in order to do that, if you go with the smallest string over here, which stretches the least, the peak of the saddle is at the front. So it has the shortest string length. Now this being the biggest string, the G string, the peak of the saddle you look is at the back. So it has actually almost more than a 1/16 of an inch of longer string length between the nut and the saddle.
And you learned this from?
You know, we talk about it in the guild. If you look at Mike Chalk, as a matter of fact, he came up with his new, I forgot what he calls it, but he has a bridge where you can turn around the saddle and you can adjust from high G to low G. See, so we all know this stuff. So compensating an instrument is not entirely foreign nowadays. Fortunately, these are, I'd like to say higher end techniques, but I think it's important because players like Kalei, you absolutely require. I've seen you play. You don't just play down in the first and second position. You come up to the third position and way past the 15th fret.
Yeah.
And if it goes off intonation up there, that doesn't do you as a player any good. You know, and you can hear that as you're going up, right? So I think it's important to compensate saddle, especially with the string diameter. Another thing interesting on this instrument, I don't know if the camera can catch this, but if you look at the saddle itself, it's not straight in. You know, I actually throw in a 7-degree angle so the saddle actually banks itself backwards. Why did I do that? I actually learned it from this builder on the mainland, Rick Turner. And he designed this specifically for pickups. This ukulele has a pickup in it. And the problem with pickups is if you have a saddle going straight in, the strings will tend to pull it forward, right? That's just natural physics of the instrument. What that does is that releases some pressure on the bottom of the saddle. So now if you angle it back 7 degrees, it pushes the saddle straight in for good contact on this, what is known as an undersaddle pickup. Now what's interesting about that is once you set the intonation or the compensation, as you raise and lower the saddle, it'll intonate properly up and down, so you don't have to set the intonation again. Whereas you go like this, if you raise it, you may have to set intonation again. If you lower it, you may have to set intonation again. By throwing in that 7-degree angle, once I set it, it's set. I can raise and lower action and not even mess with the top part of the saddle.
Wow.
So kind of interesting. Really nice. You know, a friend of mine saw me do a pickup installation, and this one has an LR Bags. I think LR Bags tends to be a little finicky when it comes to installations. I've installed Fishmans before, which are really, really easy. Those you can put in, and it goes. The LR Bags tend to be a little bit more finicky. It's specific about having a flat bottom in the bridge, flat bottom in the saddle, and absolute even contact all the way around. Once I started doing the 7-degree angle, my friend saw me install in like 15 minutes and start playing it, plug it in and go. And his words were, I installed it without incident. And you know, there's a lot of guys that I know install bags and they have balance problems between strings, which as a player is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? So it helps me with avoiding balance problems across the strings. So I do that on all my instruments now, regardless of whether it has a pickup or not.
Cool.
So, interesting
I think
stuff.
we should hear a little bit from
I think so.
Kalei.
Yeah,
Kalei.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll
And
get
then
set
we'll
up.
switch gears. We'll set
switch
up
gears.
for.
Maybe we'll talk about some inlay stuff and maybe we'll do a little demonstration on that. How's that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Are you all set, Kalei?
Yep, all set.
All right. It's all yours.
Excellent. Wow.
Thank you.
You know, you can build ukuleles, but unless you hear somebody play it, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
it's just all it is just something to look at. But you know, it takes somebody to play it nicely for it to really come alive.
absolutely, absolutely. What a talent.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, something that I've gotten into, and I would say, I like to say recently, but it actually has been a couple of years, and that is inlay on an instrument. It's a completely different craft, as I've found out, and I know a lot of guild members have attended my class over the last 2 years. You know, I did an inlay class for the exhibition, and it was kind of interesting. I had some repeat customers, so to speak, this past year, and people have talked to me and called me and emailed me and asked me for stuff, and we just go from there. In fact, I just met one of the guys today, and we were talking about inlay. The thing about inlay, it's a different skill set, as I mentioned. And I got some tools over here. What's neat about inlay, if somebody wants to get involved, is the amount of tools necessary. You know, when you build an instrument, you can imagine I got a full shop to build ukulele. But when we're talking about inlay stuff, you know,
You need a table.
yeah, well, you need a little scrap piece of wood
Yeah.
and maybe some pipe. And, you know, I got my little bird's beak sitting right under here. I don't have my vacuum cleaner hooked up, but let's look at some stuff we got over here. Can we stand up? Is that okay?
Yep. Yep.
All right. What we're going to do is we'll do a little demonstration. Is that okay?
Fine.
Okay. What I got here is actually a signature that we're going to do today. It's actually Herbolta Jr.'s signature, which I helped Paul Okami with on his Herbolta Jr. line.
Okay.
So the first one we did, and let's go back and get some history over here. When I first started talking to Paul, the first inlay that I actually did for Paul and the Koloho guys is this one right here. This is actually a prototype fretboard that I did for them. And they had really not gotten into any inlay whatsoever. I said, well, let's do something. So I drew this one up. I actually did the inlay for them. I said, well, how's about this for Herbolta Jr.'s instrument?
What is this? Rosewood and.
This is actually Cocobolo in Macassar ebony.
Okay.
So I did that, and Paul liked it. He wanted something simple. This is a wood-on-wood inlay.
Yeah.
And if you look at his actual instrument that he plays now, it ended up being a ebony fretboard with a Mamani inlay Junior. Well, he's coming out with a new line. Shh, don't tell anybody. I don't think Herb even seen this yet, but he doesn't know that we actually took Herb's actual signature off of his book with Daniel Hull. So we took his actual signature, and what we're going to do is we're going to inlay it into the headstock right underneath the Koaloha logo.
Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of interesting as a signature line, so to speak. You know, if you're going to have a signature line, in my mind, why don't you put the actual signature?
Yeah.
So from an inlay standpoint, there's some technical difficulties that we're going to deal with on this inlay. If you look at this, there's some inside lines. I'm going to use this X-Acto knife over here.
Yeah.
There's some holes in here. Okay, you got to do an inside cut in here, and then you go on the outside.
Right.
So that makes it technically more difficult. So what we do is how we get to the inside is we got to drill a hole on the inside circles, and we got to cut out the inside first, and then we go around and we start doing the outside.
Right.
Okay. Now, shall we do a little demonstration on doing some
yeah.
cutting? Okay, let's do this. Now, the one thing I'm missing over here, I'm missing my vacuum cleaner, but that's okay. We'll see what we can do.
And we want to talk about that. I mean, it's really important to have dust control when you're working with shell. You know, you should have a vacuum cleaner and also.
And I actually use a dust mask.
Yeah.
So
I have a dust mask here, but you probably don't want to wear it. It's out of my shop and it's not very clean. But you want to use a good dust mask.
You know, talking about dust masks, is this actually the cartridge type where you used to spray with?
This
I believe
is.
so.
This is vapors.
Yeah, vapors. So there's
this
two
is
types of
vapors.
dust masks.
Yeah,
There's a
there's
vapor dust
dust and
mask,
vapor.
and there's an actual dust mask. You know, before we start cutting, why don't we share some tools real quick before we start going into this? Very simple tools of the trade. These are known as jeweler saws. Now, this is the first saw that I ever bought, and what I found out later on in my inlay career is the smaller you go, the easier the saw is to handle. So I used to break a lot of blades using this saw, but this is well worn, and I'm actually fairly comfortable with that. This one's a little short. This is 2.5 inch, or 3 inch, 4 inch, and 5 inch. So I kind of stick to the 4 inch saw right now. It's comfortable. It allows me to cut a lot of things. Inside the saw, we put in some blades, and there's two basic blades that I use. And they go what they call 6/0 and 3/0 blades. Majority, I would say 99% of my inlays are done with the 3/0 blades.
Which is a smaller blade.
Which is actually a larger of the
larger
two,
blade,
right?
right.
So this is a 3/0 blade right here. I don't know if the camera can zoom in on this. And this would be the 6/0 blade. So you can see how fine that is.
Yeah, this is a pack of blades here, so this is a single blade.
That's a single blade right here. So you can see the 6/0 blade is almost half the size of the 3/0 blade.
Yeah.
Okay, so that just simply goes into the jeweler's saw. Now,
And there is a cutting side on that. This is not just a wire.
it's not a wire.
There's
There are
a
blades,
cutting surface.
just like any other saw blade.
Yeah,
So
just
and there's a
smaller.
kerf. There's an upside and a downside, a front side and a back side. And then we got a bunch of other stuff here that I use. I use some lubricant for the blade itself. So you'll see I got some of this yellow stuff on the side. And I keep the blade lubricated so we avoid breaks. Other things you'll need for inlay, just basic stuff. You'll obviously need super glue, which I use, cyanoacrylate, which I use to glue the image onto the shell. What I did was I sized it down. This is actually out of the original signature.
Yeah.
This is actually 70% smaller, and this is 80% smaller. So I decided to go with the 80% smaller when I made multiple copies on this. So there are 2 sheets right here. This is 80% smaller. We'll go with this. You're right, I make multiple copies.
Yeah.
Actually, one goes on the shell,
Yeah.
and depending on the inlay itself, I'll glue this onto the piece that it's being inlaid into,
Right.
and then I'll start routing it out. And I'll
Right.
show you what we use to route that out as well too. Not always though. Sometimes if the inlay is large enough, we might do a scribing thing around it and pull it off, and that's another inlay technique. But really, the reason I make multiple pieces, on an inlay like this, because it's so fine and so small,
Yeah.
if I break this, I got to start all over. So if I got one, we all break pieces. And we
Yeah, I
all,
know, but I'm just looking at this. I mean, it just gives me the shudders just to even think about cutting out a signature.
well,
Have you ever done any inlay work?
No, not
Yeah,
at all.
I've done some real simple stuff like a turtle or something.
Uh-huh.
You know, real safe stuff. You know, and when I look at signatures, oh my goodness.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're getting into shells. So we're going to do this in white mother of pearl. So there's different types of mother of pearl. This one is gold mother of pearl here. So this is nice. I actually like this a lot. There's different thicknesses that you can get it in. This is a popular shell. It's called Paua abalone from New Zealand. And recently, well, not so recently, they have this other, what was known as ablam. It's a Paua abalone laminate. This is Paua, and this is pink abalone. So I don't know if the camera can catch some of the different colors and different angles in it. These are actually scraps from a company that I order from. You see the little edges over here. What they've done with this is they've cut out curved strips in this, which guitar makers use as the rosette around the sound holes. So these are the leftovers that obviously they can sell to guys like me, so they do.
Yeah.
So just some different shells here.
Well, the shell's relatively expensive. I bought a small pack of miscellaneous pieces, and I think it was $80 or something for, you know, they could fit in a relatively small baggie.
I think they usually sell it by the ounce.
Yeah.
And then to be honest with you, I'm finding out the actual shell itself is now becoming cheaper than the ablam,
Oh,
which is unusual. With the shell, especially the abalone shells, there's some grain in here,
Yeah.
so it's not entirely consistent. The nice thing about cutting ablam is it's basically thin pieces of the shell in an epoxy base. So cutting it is very, very consistent. There's no grain in
For
it
the
whatsoever
ablam.
for the ablam.
Yeah.
So cutting ablam is really, really nice. Almost like cutting ivory, which I don't have here, but I have some legal ivory at home. Cutting ivory is really nice. So I know why they use it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this jeweler saw and we're gonna open it up, and this is how we get the inside cut. We stick it in through the hole. Sorry about this. We're gonna stick the blade in through the hole, just like that, and then we're gonna set the saw. Now, the problem with shell when you're using tooling and machinery at home is, you know, if you use a drill, you can really blow out either the bit or the shell, okay? So you talk about going back into the dark ages. You ever seen one of those, Doug?
well, yeah, I grew up with those, but not that small. I grew up with the bigger ones. And, you know, my background is carpentry.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that this is a hand drill. And this drill I got off of the internet. And what I do is I take these little drill bits right here that came with the set, you hook it in, and it's pretty much a manual job all the way to go ahead and drill out the hole.
Nice.
The thing about this is, you know, it'll fit these small little bits. You
Yeah.
know, I got drills at home that won't even grab onto this. So hence,
Yeah.
I said, well, let's get something since I'm going to be doing this.
Nice.
Cheap, but effective, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how's about we get started on this?
Where did you find this on eBay or something?
I found that on eBay, as a matter of fact. Okay, so what we're going to do, Doug, if you look at this, we're going to do an inside cut on
Yeah.
this circle here. Now, I'm right-handed, So what I do is I go in and I cut counterclock. I keep the line on the left side of me. So if you're right-handed or left-handed, you're gonna figure out which way you want it to go. The objective of this saw blade is to keep it straight up and down.
Right.
If you start twisting it, if you start angling it like this, when you inlay it into the wood or whatever you inlay, it's not gonna be nice. It's not gonna be nice. So let's go ahead and start. And basically you wanna go straight up and down here. Now this is what is known as a bird's beak. Normally what I do is I have a vacuum attachment to here, and this is just basically PVC piping up and below.
Right.
So what it does is it sucks the shell in from the top and from underneath.
Right.
So there's nothing that goes anywhere. All right, so let's go ahead. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go from the hole right to the edge, make a right turn. Now it's the right turn that a lot of guys get problems with, because right here, right when you get to that edge of the image, you wanna kind of like a marching band, saw up and down, and it's like you're
like
marching in place. Exactly. So you've done this before.
No.
You came
Not
to my
inside.
class, no. So,
But I did, I had to do some inside cuts with it, when I'm doing my dolphins or turtles or whatever.
right. Problem with, I can feel this blade is a little dull already, so I might break it. But what I do is I hold it, and I'm actually looking forward. If I had a vacuum attachment, this would blow out really nicely. But what I try to do is I look forward from the cut. And if you look at my position on the blade, it's above the saw, and I'm looking forward. So we're just gonna crank this out somewhat quickly.
Kalei, have you seen Inlay done before?
No, never in my
You
life.
should come down and get a closer view here.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So you can appreciate, the
Okay, so
Inlay is a real. You got to have some patience.
yeah, again, it's a different skill set
Yeah.
from building ukulele. So right there, once we cut the inside hole, you got to get adept at doing that. You can pull out the knife, or pull out the blade, and then you go from there. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and finish this whole thing, but the objective of cutting an inlay is actually just so slightly taking off the edge of the image. Okay, you don't want to leave any white, so to speak. So
Right.
you definitely want to take off the edge of the image. So I'll show you another technical hard part about doing an inlay like this, and that is coming into a corner. So when you do that, we'll just go right from here. We go ahead and meet up right there, just like we did first. We'll go ahead and march in place, so to speak. And you notice I turned the saw and I turned the piece at the same time. So we'll go ahead and cut. And then here's another marching in place, and you turn the piece. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come straight into this V over here. And I keep the line on the left side of me. Again, I'm a right-handed cutter. If you're left-handed, you're gonna go the opposite way. It depends on whatever's comfortable for you. So now we're coming into that edge, and I don't have my vacuum, so I've actually left a little white on there, so I know this. So I'm gonna have to go in and file it down and make it a little narrow. But when you're coming into the corner right there, what you wanna do is come back out, march in place, just like this, and you notice this is where the blade's gonna break if it does. You turn around and you back it in.
Oh.
So now you
So
start.
you're still keeping the line on your left.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you march in place and you angle yourself so you come straight up and you continue following the line. So right from here.
Oh, so that's a little bit more difficult, getting your first bite.
Exactly. So basically, I'm just going to pull this out right now. That's what it's going to look like right there.
Cool.
So if you take a look at that, you can see what we did.
It's pretty fine. I don't think the camera can pick up your cut. Can you see it, Kalei?
No, not even with the naked eye. You can barely see it.
Some guys ask me, do I use magnifying glass or something when I do this? And I'm like, no, because very rarely you're going to get somebody with a magnifying glass looking at your inlay, right?
Yeah.
So I do the inlay based on how I view it. Once we're done with the inlay and we cut out the shell, unfortunately, I don't think we have time to go ahead and finish this up. But we need to go ahead and inlay it into another piece of wood. So in this case, if this junior in Cocobolo was the shell, we would have inlaid it into this piece of Macassar ebony.
Right.
Now there are different ways to do that. Again, like you said, we could take this, glue it down, and then we go ahead and route it out. Now you can imagine, we're gonna actually route out this small little piece, or this small little channel right there. So this shell actually fits inside like a jigsaw puzzle, okay? In order to do that, you need very, very, very small bits. So these are some bits that I use. These are the 3 common sizes of what is known as down-cut inlay bits, okay? This is 1/16, 3/32, and 3/64, and 1/32 of an inch.
1/32 is the smallest one.
1/32 is the smallest I use.
Yeah. Will you use the 1/32 for almost this whole signature then?
I will use the 1/32 exactly.
For the whole thing,
Yeah.
because it's just pretty
that
thin.
exactly. Now on larger, on an inlay such as this, I'm going to use the largest bit I possibly can to hog it out. Now, very important to know.
If you're doing a larger inlay like this, do you hog out the inside and then work to the outside, or do you do the outside first?
Good question. I haven't decided which is more comfortable for me yet. Most of the time, I will hog out the inside and come right to the edge. I'll hog out the inside with the larger bit. That way, when I use the smaller bits, break faster. That way, when I use a smaller bit, there's only one side of the bit touching. Whereas if I use a smaller bit first, it's completely encircled by wood, and the chances of heating up and breaking is greater.
And they're not cheap.
They're not cheap. If you buy it online from one bit at a time, they'll run anywhere from $18 to $24.
Yeah, and they might last 10 minutes if you're careless.
I've had an $18 bit like this last me about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
As soon as I put it in, it blew up
Yeah.
because I didn't know what I was doing.
So you have to be really careful.
You have to be extremely careful. So, in fact, a builder that I met today, and he picked up some bits for me, I suggested to him that he not be afraid of changing bits. You know, always start with your largest bit and then go, that's what I do. Start with the largest bit and go to the smallest bit. And use your smallest bit for the minimum amount of things that you can use it for.
Do you ever use a larger bit than?
I actually have 2 more sizes larger than this.
Yeah.
I actually go up to a 3/32 and 1/8 inch
1/8.
bit. Oddly enough, I bring those 2 bits in at the recommendation of Bob Gleason on the Big Island from the Guild. He said guys will buy that because they'll use it for slotting their saddles. As you know, a common saddle slot size is 3/32 and 1/8 of an inch. But I'll use the 1/8 because now I'm doing really, really large, what is known as narrative style of inlay. So half the headstock is an inlay. So I'll use the 1/8 inch bit to hog out most of it, and then I'll come down to the smaller bits just to catch the edges. So yeah, moving on from the bits over here. These are the bits that we use. Now, a lot of guys use Dremel. They'll use a Dremel to go ahead and inlay or route out the channels into their wood. Well, Dremels are excellent tools if that's what you got. This is a flexible shaft tool. So I thought, well, I can get a Dremel flex shaft, and just use that. Big, big, big difference. The Fordham actually has much more power. You don't need a whole lot. This, I think, is a 1/8 or 1/6 horsepower, which is popular, and it'll set you back a few dollars, so to speak, right? What I've done is
And you also use the foot pedal with this.
I'm going to get to the foot pedal.
Okay.
Well, since you mentioned that, the biggest difference in using a Fordham and a Dremel is the foot pedal.
Yeah.
The foot pedal control is amazing, and it gives you so much control over what's going on at the bit over here.
Yeah.
I actually bought this router base, so to speak, from one of the online retailers.
Yeah, precision router base.
Yep, and you can adjust it up and down. So you go on, and then you adjust your router base up and down.
Yeah.
What's nice about this is it's light.
And it also has the connection here for compressed air, so it'll blow and keep your product clean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me show you a little tip that I've shared with some of my fellow builders.
Yeah.
Because I'm cheap.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy the compressed air.
Yeah.
So if you look at my bit that I have on here,
Oh,
see that little piece of blue tape?
your fan.
There's a fan. I had some guys come over and I taught how to inlay, right, that I was doing some work with. I said, okay, hold on, put a little piece of tape on there. And they laughed at me, completely laughed at me. And they totally out-routed the channel, and then my channel came out nice, right? They're like, you're kidding me, right? So they put the little fan tape on. Won't move without it now. So just this little piece of tape right here that you see makes a huge difference in your ability to see what's going on when you're routing out.
And so you can still see past the tape, so you can see a route.
Oh, absolutely. It spins so fast, you just look right through. It's like a fan. You
Yeah.
look through a fan, and it's so simple. Then I have less hanging on to the router base over here. So it's kind of neat. It's kind of neat. Again, you can set your depth on here, right?
Yeah.
And then you go ahead and route out. What's nice about this base is I guess they have another attachment over here that you can use to route out circles around your sound hole, things like that. But yeah, if you're gonna get into inlay, highly suggest getting a powerful flex shaft to a dedicated one. Now be careful. For everyone that's used the Dremel, the first time you step on that foot pedal, right?
Yeah, it has some torque.
You did that already,
Yeah,
right?
it has some torque. Yeah.
Let me take this away and we'll
right.
put it on the side. All right. So if you ever want to get your signature inlaid, like you got a Sam Kamaka inlay on that instrument right there, right? That's actually Sam Kamaka's signature up on the headstock.
Yeah.
So that's a rare Kamaka instrument you got there, because not many of them you see with his actual, it's an S Kamaka, you see the signature. So that's a nice instrument you got there. So very similar means of doing the inlay. If you saw what we did with Herb's one, what it took, you'll see some inside circles on that. They had to do the same thing for that.
Wow.
So a lot of technical ability in the person that did that inlay as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we talked about inlays, we talked about building. I had mentioned that inlays is actually a different craft in and of itself, as you know, from building ukulele. Now you can take inlays, and there's one more step that I've learned that is that we can do, and that is called engraving. So I got some engraving tools over here, and we won't go too much into it because we don't have anything to engrave, but these are basically jeweler's gravers. And what this does is it allows you to put in detail in the shell on things that are cut out. You can put in shadows. I've actually got a scrimshaw little pointy thing over here, so I can actually go through, doing dots like that and doing shadows. And what I'll do with this,
What, is that a carbon tip then?
it's a carbon tip.
Okay.
Really what this is for is, it's called a scrimshaw point.
Right.
For the whalers that used to get whale bones, and you'll see the scrimshaw, they use this tool. Well, you can use it in inlay, and you press down like that, and you put little dots inside. Very similar to if you grab a jeweler's graver here,
Yeah.
and you can actually go ahead and grave a line inside here. And if you do that, and I'll just throw a line right in there. What that does is it allows you to take an engraving filler, which I have, and you fill it up like this. You come across. And once you wipe it away, you can imagine you can add a whole lot of detail to your inlay when you start adding lines like that.
And it won't. It sticks pretty good.
This
it won't
one,
fall out.
this one you'll have to finish. You'll have
Yeah.
to put a finish over this. Now, if I'm doing something with an inlay on a fretboard, I won't use the filler. This is almost like crayon.
Yeah.
But what I will do is I'll use enamel paint or some kind of ink if it's on the fretboard.
Yeah.
Will it wear out eventually? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It'll wear out eventually. So you got to be careful when you're doing inlays. Now, what I've done is the guy that actually makes this, he's a famous builder and inlay artist in Canada. I actually emailed him, and he sent me a couple of his extra colors over here. So a lot of guys inlay in black, but you know what? There's a whole slew of colors that you can inlay as well too. So once you get into color inlay, you add a whole different dimension to what's going to happen to your inlay art, just like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The guys. I don't know. I'm sure you looked at some of the inlay work that the guys from Japan did this year
Yeah, absolutely.
at the show, and they just, I mean, it really is. It's not craft anymore. It's absolutely art.
It becomes artwork,
Yeah.
and I think I mentioned early on that half of my work now is actually inlay work.
Yeah.
And not inlay work for myself. I've been fortunate enough to meet up with obviously the Okamis, and the latest builder that I've been working with is John Kitakis. So I think he was a member of the guild at one point in time too. But we just finished a Hula Kahiko inlay that he displayed at the NAMM show.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So we're working on number 2. I did an orchid inlay for him, actually on a refurbished Kamaka, and we got some more projects going on down the line. Paul again always has something on the plate for me, so we got some stuff that's going to Japan, and go from there.
You got a song for us, Kalei?
Yeah, sure, no
All right,
problem.
let's do it.
This is actually a song that I wrote in 2008, and it's entitled Mach 4.
All right.
And the reason for that, I had no idea what I should name the song because I know it's fast, but the first thing that came to my mind was a jet.
Yeah.
And I know that they fly at high speed. So.
And you have a CD out. Is this a song that's on your CD?
No, actually,
Maybe the next one, huh?
yeah, maybe the next one,
Okay.
but I just released my CD last year.
Wonderful.
Here we go.
What was that? Mach what?
Mach 4.
Mach 4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
That was
thank you.
wonderful.
I'm sweating.
Yeah,
I'm sweating listening to him.
I know 4 chords.
You know, I was watching him play. I got to be honest with you. Not that I'm looking for filler and stuff, but I was watching him play, and I'm sorry. I'm scribbling a few things on this little piece of shell, and I don't know, Doug, if you can see what I'm scribbling out over here. It just looks like a couple of lines. You mind if I share?
No, go
One of the
ahead.
important things that I feel an inlay artist needs is the technical ability to draw as well too. And I don't consider myself an artist by any means. What I do is I take a piece of art or a picture or a photograph, which I base my inlay off of, and I mechanically reproduce it. So if you have, I think most builders have mechanical ability. I have no artistic ability, as I say myself. I have mechanical ability. So I don't look at like a picture as a piece of art and I got to go and draw it. I break it down and I do a process where I mechanically reproduce by hand into three-dimensional material. So as I'm looking at Kalei, you know, I'm not the best artist, but I'm drawing some stuff over here, and I'm figuring, well, you know, what exactly are you going to inlay when it comes to faces and stuff, right? I mean, where does that come into shell work and artwork? So why don't we do a little thing like that?
Yeah, and I saw your demonstration you did on inlay, not at this last show, but the year before. And I know at that time you had a conversation, and I was pretty impressed about it because the conversation was about the thought process that you went through designing a piece of artwork. Because the person that's coming in that wants a custom piece of artwork done or a custom inlay, they really don't know what they want. So you really dig around a little bit and kind of have a conversation and assist with that thought process to come up with a design.
You know, I think that's important. From a builder standpoint, I think as a player, unless you actually get a custom instrument, you don't appreciate what a custom builder can bring to you. When I consult with a client and they come over to my house and we talk about building a custom instrument, it's a 2.5-hour process, and we're just talking woods. You know, sometimes they don't understand what certain woods do, how they sound, what the end result will be. And of course, we add in things such as neck profile and how do you want this thing to feel. When we're talking about custom inlays, you talk about just a blank slate, and really, honestly, people really don't know where you can go from that. And I'll give you an example. I did an inlay for Danny Kalei a couple years ago, and we talked for an hour and a half. And what did we come up with? His signature, and that's it. An hour and a half later, we came up with his signature.
Yeah.
But I'm going to share that story, actually. He wanted Danny on his fretboard. And I said, why? This is just out of curiosity. He said, well, that's what his fans know him as. And he relayed on to me that his Kanaka Maole, internally, his Hawaiian is Kaneala. And everyone knows him as Kaneala. So I asked him, very simple question. This was a gift from Alvin Okami going to Danny Kalei. I said, is this instrument representing your fans or is it representing you? And he said, oh no, this is my instrument. This is a gift. This is me. So I said, this instrument is not your fans then. So I pitched to him, your fans, Danny, you, Kaneala, and he got it right away. And then we started talking a little more, and it became very simply his signature in the fretboard. Now, does that mean anything to anyone outside of Danny? No, especially people outside of Hawaii.
Right.
But does that mean everything to him as a player? It does, exactly. I'm going to share a different story, just one more, that I did for Letter Kaapana. He's a master of everything with strings, and he can play anything. So when I was talking to his wife, and she said, a good inlay on his instrument would be maybe a collage of all the instruments that he plays, from the ones that he's done certain recordings on, back when he was young. And so I drew out a collage of instruments up the fretboard. It was very, very busy, but I was willing to do that, right? They thought it was very, very busy. It took me a long time to draw that out, right? But Sharon came back and said, why don't we do something a little bit simpler? Let's do his dad's guitar, which he has, and let's do his mom's ukulele, which he has. So I did something a little different. Let's focus on the mom's ukulele. The mom's ukulele is a standard Martin from way back when. And back in the old days, Hawaiians used to write their names in code, not necessarily in code, but in numbers. So his mom's name, Tina, I hope you don't mind me sharing this story. His mom's name, Tina, is written out T502. So the numbers and letters represent her name, Tina. And if you look inside the sound hole, she took a March pen and wrote her name, T502. And then there's CF Martin, you know, the logo, the stamp. Back then they used to stamp the inside. So what I did was I took a picture of that, and that's what's inlaid on his fretboard, T502, and then CF Martin and Company on an instrument that I built for lettering. Now, if you were to look at an instrument, what does that mean? Nothing at all, right? But his sister saw the instrument the day that I delivered it to him, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "You got Mom's name on your instrument." You know, so that becomes very, very personal to the player at that point in time. So that conversation, and this is what I'm talking about, that conversation. The inlay is not just something that, to me, that you just put on an instrument. It can be so much more. It can be not just a part of the instrument, but a part of the player. Now, when the player grabs that instrument, does that belong spiritually to anybody else? No. That is spiritually his instrument, and he doesn't let anybody else touch that instrument.
Wow.
Lets me touch it, fortunately. But I was scribbling on some, getting back to this, I was scribbling on some stuff, and tell me, can you see what I just drew?
Yeah.
You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
That would be, you know, a bad example of your hairline. And but
Kalei's hair and
you know, let's have some fun over here.
Yeah.
You know, if I was to represent that part of your face in an inlay, very, very difficult. You know, very, very difficult to cut out pieces of shell. So the way you do that mechanically is you take a graver, and I actually drew it out with a pencil. So you're actually going to go and you're actually going to scribe each individual line of his hair, and you got to watch which way it goes, got to watch which way his hair flows. And I try to, you know, as accurately as you draw it, you copy it on this line, because you don't want to go free. I don't have the ability to freehand this.
Mm-hmm. Can you kind of twist this way
absolutely.
a little bit?
So we're just going to go and try to copy some of this stuff. Oops, that one went a little farther. And I'm rushing this, but we'll see what happens. Normally, this is the part of the inlay that actually takes the longest. For me, it's actually the engraving, because you really, really, really got to take your time. If you don't take your time on this, it's going to look rushed. And if you make a mistake, dare I say, you really got to start all over. So that is not a good thing. And I've already been there. I've had to route out an entire inlay because I did a boo-boo scratch right across, and then there it goes, right? So if we scribe in lines like that, we'll go ahead and fill it up. This is almost like a crayon texture. So I think some of the guys from overseas, they actually use crayon as engraving. Mm-hmm. Really, you're supposed to, what I use is a napkin. A napkin tends to be a little stiffer. This one, if you use a rag wrong,
it'll wipe
it out.
Yeah.
So you really want to use a napkin on this, paper towel or something. But if you look at what we did right there, that would be it.
Aaron, thanks a lot for your demonstrations. It was so interesting. I learned a lot.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
I'm hoping everybody else out in the audience did. I'm sure they did.
Oh, they enjoyed it.
I really appreciate it. You know, thanks to the audience for joining us for another edition of Ook Builders Workshop. Are you ready to hear a little bit more of Kalei?
I'm anxious.
I am too.
Waiting right here.
Kalei, take us out.